This is how utterly and entirely self-obsessed and high on their own fumes the left has become. They've reached a level of self-absorption that is indistinguishable from psychosis. Today we'll deal with something that is so cancelable that there is almost no point in canceling it. It's the kind of cancellation that will require very little thought or effort, but sometimes you have to take a swing at the softballs that are lobbed right down the middle of the plate. So that brings us to something posted on CNN.com this past week entitled, "A Guide to Neo-Pronouns from A to Z." This article, written by a woman named Scotty Andrews, it's the kind of thing that 8 or 9 years ago could have only existed as parody. In fact, 8 or 9 years ago, if I had written this exact article as a satire of leftism, almost everyone would agree that the satire is too outlandish and bizarre to really land. It doesn't ring true. It's a straw man, not a satire. That's what people would have said. Fast forward less than a decade, and leftism has exceeded even the wildest fever dream of the satirist. We now live in a world where something like this is written with all seriousness and sincerity and published on one of the most trafficked news sites in the country. The article begins, quote, "He's my boss. Her dog is cute. They have an exam today. Pronouns are part of speech we use to refer to ourselves and others. They're an essential component of language and, as of the last few years, among its most hotly contested too." Okay, I have to stop already here. To be clear, pronouns are not hotly contested. There is no legitimate debate about pronouns. What many of us contest, what we categorically deny because it's insane, is the idea that a man can or should use pronouns that actually apply to women or vice versa. So the real issue is not the word, but the thing the word is supposed to represent. In fact, it turns out that everyone still basically agrees that men are referred to as he and women as she. This is not disputed by almost anyone. That's why you rarely, if ever, hear anyone say, "I'm a man, but I use she, her pronouns." You never hear that. Now, I'm sure eventually the left will get around to that kind of nonsense, but that's not generally how it goes now. Everyone generally still agrees that she, her applies to women and he, him applies to men. Again, the pronouns aren't being contested. So when a man says, "I'm a woman, call me she," the second part of that sentence isn't really the problem, at least not the underlying problem. It's the first part. It's that he isn't really a woman. If he was a woman, then I would certainly call him she. He's correct that is the pronoun that we should use for those who are women. But he is not a woman. So this may seem like semantics perhaps, but it's anything but. This is the whole point. The left likes to pretend that they're simply expanding our language, that they're loosening the rules of grammar and so on. But that is not fundamentally the issue. This isn't really about language. It's about the reality that the language is meant to represent. When they insist that we call a man a she, they are insisting that we agree with the claim that the man is a woman. They are recruiting us not into some looser conception of language, but into a false conception of reality. The point is that for the most part, the left still abides by what they pretend to decry as restrictive and outdated language rules. They still adhere to those rules. They still believe that men are called he and women are called she, but they also believe, or pretend to believe, that a man is a woman if he claims to be one. But then, of course, we get to these so-called neo-pronouns, and this is where things really do dissolve into pure gibberish. So let's keep reading. Quote, "And then there are neo-pronouns, gender-neutral or non-binary pronouns that are distinct from the common she, he, and they. Neo-pronouns include terms like Z and M, and some of them even date back several centuries, when they were introduced by writers as a solution for referring to subjects without assuming gender. Now they're also commonly used by non-binary and trans people. All pronouns indicate identity and can be used to include or exclude people they describe, neo-pronouns included," said Dennis Barron, one of the foremost experts on neo-pronouns and their histories and an emeritus professor of English and linguistics at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Neo-pronouns should be used and respected like any other pronoun, he told CNN. "People like to have a say in how they're identified," Barron said. "Refusing to let people self-identify is a way of excluding them." Well, that last part is nonsense, of course. I mean, the whole thing is nonsense. Every part is nonsense. But that last part in particular is nonsense because nobody is interfering with anyone else's ability to self-identify. You can perceive yourself however you want to perceive yourself. There's no possible way for me to control your self-perception of yourself, even if I wanted to. But there's a difference between, in letting people decide who they identify as and letting people decide how they are identified, okay? The latter has nothing to do with the former. The former is your own thought process. It's your own perception. So, if you think to yourself, and if you're a man and you think to yourself, "I'm a woman," that's your self-identity. It's like, I can't stop you from thinking that. That thought process and perception is wildly wrong, but you're free to see yourself in a wildly wrong way. Again, nobody can stop you. The latter, however, how you are identified, is someone else's perception. It's someone else's thought process. They identify you according to their perception of you. And just as they can't control your perception of yourself, you can't control their perception of you. Now, we haven't even really gotten into the meat of the neo-pronoun discussion because I keep running into incredibly stupid statements in need of correction. So let's just try to charge forward. Quote, neo-pronouns, meanwhile, are less commonly used than those three familiar pronouns. They're often used by non-binary, trans, and gender non-conforming people because they offer more freedom of identity. In his book, What's Your Pronoun?, Barron wrote that neo-pronouns, quote, expand the ways that people are able to indicate their gender identity to encompass anyone who is trans or non-binary, as well as those who choose an altogether different term to characterize their gender. Other neo-pronouns are completely original to their user. Some may choose to select a noun to describe themselves, like star or star self, in place of binary pronouns like she or herself. These are called noun self neo-pronouns. No, these are called bull. And if you prefer a more technical term, that's it. But I'm going to skip around from here a little bit because there's only so much of this we can take. Eventually, we're given a handy guide on how to use this gibberish, and here are some examples in the article. I asked Zur to come to the movies. Z said yes. The teacher graded Zur paper today, and Zay got an A. Faye told me that Fair best friend is in town this week. I'm taking M to the park today. A wants to bring Air camera to capture the garden for M-self. I hope Leaf knows how proud we are that Leaf is getting to know Leaf self better. You know, this reminds me of one of my kids' favorite Dr. Seuss books. It's called There's a Wocket in My Pocket. And this reminds me of that book in some way because Dr. Seuss also enjoyed making up silly words off the top of his head. The only difference is that he didn't expect us to take it seriously, but this is what the left has become. When they talk about pronouns, it sounds like something Dr. Seuss might have come up with if he had green hair and a nose piercing and was high on crack. But perhaps the most revealing part of this article comes from the one single example the author can find of an actual human being using neo-pronouns. And it says this, quote, Dua Saleh, a musician and actor who's appeared on the Netflix hit series Sex Education, uses the pronoun they and z, xe. Selah told their social media followers in 2020 after Z started to use Z pronouns that it's, quote, really affirming to find the pronouns that are right for you. I just like the neo-pronouns, Selah told Complex in 2022. I feel like they fit me better, not all the time, but they're just fitting. There's an element where I'm just like, oh, that sounds really nice, or it sounds nice coming out of my mouth, or hearing other people say it. Well, there it is. You might have been wondering, how in the hell can someone identify as Zur? What does it mean to identify as a Zur? Like, how does one come to the conclusion that they are a Zur? What is a Zur? Is it similar to a wocket in the pocket? Well, this is the answer. Zur and Z and the other pronouns are, as you suspected, just a bunch of nonsensical drivel. They don't mean anything. They don't signify anything. They aren't even making a false claim about reality as a man, does when he says that he identifies as a she, because there's no claim being made. Like when someone says, I'm a Zur, that is a claim so nonsensical that you can't even say it's false. Because to say it's false is to say that there's like some coherent statement that's being made that doesn't reflect reality. But Zur, that's just not anything. That is nothing at all. It's like, it's not true or false. It's nothing. It's pure gibberish. So when someone identifies this way, it's because, as Dua Saleh says, they like the way it sounds. It sounds nice to them. Now, you might be thinking, isn't it pure insanity to assign gibberish to other people that they have to say simply because you think it sounds nice? The answer is no, it's not insane. It's narcissistic. It is industrial-grade narcissism. It is narcissism so pure, so potent, that it seems like insanity. This is how utterly and entirely self-obsessed and high on their own fumes the left has become. They've reached a level of self-absorption that is indistinguishable from psychosis. That's what the neo-pronoun represents. It's the moment when selfish crosses over into psychotic, and the two can no longer be distinguished. The distinction is now moot. They might not be clinically insane, but they are so egotistical that they might as well be. Or excuse me, Z might as well be. And that is why Neo-Pronouns are today canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.